So those who have joined already and those who are going to join and listen to the recording later, welcome to this information session. Thank you for taking the time. We'll just start by introducing the team here. My name is Cynthia Westaway, and I've worked in this area for a number of years, about 30 now, working first in litigation and in private practice. I clerked at the federal court and the Supreme Court of Canada. And then I worked for government for about 10 years in kind of cross-cutting issues and Section 35 litigation sections. And then I started out in my own private practice working for First Nations about 15 years ago. So Westaway Law recently became part of First Peoples Law, and we continue to do this across the country. So I hope to your First Nation to bring some of the expertise that I have from working over my lifetime with the Algonquins, with the Odawas, with the Dene, all across Canada. And so I'm hoping that we can really do a lot of governance development and lawmaking and things that you want to do. I've had amazing guidance from your technical teams and your leadership in the form of governance workshops already. So I've been listening a lot and putting some of that to practice to make sure we're doing MCK specific work. And so I want to say that I'm very excited about this, and I'm very excited about all the different projects that are going. We wanted to start by sharing today and sharing often with you. So the other part of our First Peoples Law team, Carrie Young, could not be here today. She resides in Hudson, has a long experience in the area, and has done a lot of this work with me for the last 3 or 4 years. And she's sick today with pneumonia, or she would be here, but you will see Carrie at these other presentations. And then I'll introduce Saber Pictuli, get her to introduce herself a little bit.
Hi, everyone. I'm Saber Pictuli. I'm a lawyer with First Peoples Law. I've been here for about 2 years, and I've been on this file since basically day one. I'm also Mi'kmaq, and I come from a small First Nation community in northeastern New Brunswick called Eel River Bar First Nation. And before becoming a lawyer, I spent about 10 years as a researcher, where I specialized in Indigenous-related research, as well as historical issues and traditional and custom laws. So it's been wonderful to be here, and I'm looking forward to this presentation with everyone.
Thanks, Saber. And we're super proud of Saber. She was Indigenous Entrepreneur of the Year and got an award at the UN this year. So we were all cheering and excited about her achievements. So you've got a really enthusiastic team. We've got the whole firm behind us. And of course, we've been working with your technical leadership as well as your chiefs. And so maybe Chief Brandt, if you wouldn't mind saying a few words about what we've done so far and how we've been working, that might be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. So MCK was introduced to Cynthia, I think in 2022, around October, about this time of year. And it was for a few seminars, I believe. But at that time, just discussing with Cynthia and just the way she conducted the presentation, we were really impressed. And we thought, maybe engaging tentatively at first and everything, maybe regarding land claims or IRSD, general land issues, because that seems to be really what we were interested in at the time would be a good idea. And I gotta say, Cynthia, Saber, Carrie, First Peoples Law, they've really pushed the file quite a bit further than I think anyone on council was expecting. And well, for the lawmaking process, that came a bit later, and that was really that was not something we were expecting to be able to do this term, or we thought it would be much more onerous. But then speaking with Cynthia and everybody and everything, we realized that this is something that can get done in this term, and I'm sure most people will agree that lawmaking is something that is sorely needed in the community. So even though this is just a general governance update, we envision this as part of the larger lawmaking process. And we'll probably be hearing from Cynthia, Saber, and Kerry a little more later on regarding the first law, the lawmaking law, and some other ones we have before the end of the term. But other than that, yeah, I'll turn it back.
Okay, thank you. So we have been able to secure a place at the RIRSD table. And that is what used to be called the exploratory table. And I've done this in a number of different places. And so that table is supposed to be First Nation led. And so I thought that was perfect for MCK to do what its primary concerns were. And we're seeing that, there are places where you want your own laws. The laws that are in place for the province and for the federal government are not working. They are not protecting the people. They're not protecting the lands, the shores, the waters. And so the real focus is taking up that space and making sure you're doing your laws, and that Canada is supporting that, paying for that, working together, and making sure that you're fully supported as you deserve. So at the first, just as an overview, we know that you need a process, so we'll introduce that tonight, and then we'll do a full consultation with the community on the lawmaking process by video and in person, and then you'll be able to have a vote and get that process in place. Ideally, so that very smoothly we can get some environmental laws, some land and water protection, some protection for safety in place, things that we're hearing. So we were asked to work on the lawmaking process, and that is complete, and we're presenting it to you tonight. Also a code of ethics. Every governance body has a code of ethics, and you have your practices that have already been followed. You've had your election code, so you have lots of really good policies and rules in place, but there wasn't really a forward-looking code of ethics. So we put that together, and that will also come to you right after the lawmaking process, because it's pretty much ready to go. Another week or so on that, I think. And then a trespass law to make sure that people are not trespassing onto your lands, land protection law, and the state of emergency law. If something goes wrong, when there's spills, when there's illegal cutting and dumping, you have your own laws in place and they can be enforced. So those are the things that we've done first, and there'll be more, whatever the community tells us they need. I think the chiefs want to get going on that. So the objective is really to make a lawmaking process that's accessible and clear, and everybody understands how we're going to get these laws in place. So standardized tests or steps, although they're a little bit boring, I'm sorry, they really do help people understand and give transparency, how you're going to make your laws, how you're going to amend them, how you're going to repeal them when they're no longer needed. And really there's a real focus, of course, on community leadership, involvement, the role of the community in giving that guidance, but the role of the technicians to do the work, and the role of the politicians to really move it forward. So everybody has their important part. So we're going to have a community meeting to discuss more formally. This is just an introduction that we thought we would record tonight to get this going. But November 14th, between 6 and 8, we're going to do a full introduction to that process. And then we want to reach on reserve, off reserve, people who are working, people who are not working, people who can come out, people who can't come out. So we will do them electronically. And then we'll also do an in-person meeting so that we can meet you and be together on November 23rd from 6 to 8. Those are important dates to remember. Again, the purpose of the land protection law that we're going to bring to you in future is, of course, to protect the members, to protect your lands and your membership. It will reaffirm, when you see the language that we've drafted, the responsibility that you have as stewards and the community members and the leadership for the environment and the entire ecosystem. So it's not piecemeal, but it's looking at the whole and the way that it needs to be understood. These are laws that need to reflect what MCK wants, but there are also laws that I'm drafting so that if they are taken to court, they are defensible. They follow procedural fairness. They follow all of the rules that will make them ironclad, I hope, before the courts. So we're trying to do both things there. And uphold our obligations to the members and to the ancestors that have left all of this for us. Hey, Fran, you'll just wave at me if you want to say anything, and same thing with you, Saber, if you want to.
Absolutely.
So we're also going to bring to you, just by way of overview, we've been working on a state of emergency law. And that's because the chiefs have said they really need to be able to act quickly. And we can't be behind the 8 ball. So this is always to build a better future. So we're going to be looking at the state of emergency law to prohibit trespass and make sure that non-member access to the land can't interfere with member access.
And just a couple more points
Yeah,
too, because there's a little bit of overlap with the trespass law. This also enables for the adoption of emergency measures and affirms the responsibility back to our politicians and the elected council to protect the community through enacting any type of emergency measures. So that's part of this state of emergency law as well.
The trick has been to draft them to all work together like a piece of a puzzle or like a quilt, so that we can see that, you know, there's some emergency provisions in your trespass law. Your trespass law works with your environmental laws. Your environmental laws work with your trespass law. So all of that we've done together. So hopefully they can you'll see them and they can reflect a cohesive body of protection. Anything to say about the trespass law, Saber?
No, just again, that it affirms the responsibility and prohibits really non-members and have some safeguards and regulations around that. And again, this is in draft form and will be coming to the community in the near future.
Yeah, we want to bring that to, well, written to you and all together, and then get the feedback that we need on how it can be implemented, maybe some regulations, some policies that need to go with these laws. Laws are very, as you know, kind of high level, and they are very, they apply across the board. So you don't make laws for a specific situation. You make laws that will apply going forward for all time, and are defensible before the courts. Then you can make policies and you can exercise your discretion in certain situations. So, for example, if I draft a law that members only have access to housing on reserve, for example, I mean, recently we did one of those in another community. That would be a very high level law. Then there would be a membership policy on how you determine what happens when someone passes and there's a non-member spouse and all those complications around children and stepchildren. And then you would have a board set up or an elders committee that when they have to exercise discretion, someone's lost their spouse, they're 92, you don't want them to leave a residence until they pass. Maybe that committee can exercise their discretion. So that's an example of how you have a high level law, then you develop policies on how it works on the ground, and then you develop some kind of dispute mechanism or committee who can help make the best decision for the membership in difficult cases. So those are kind of generally, so we're not trying to make a law that speaks to every single situation. It has to be very across the board and high level.
Yeah, I do just want to add to that a part of prioritizing the draft laws we currently have has been by direction of council from listening to calls to action from the community and addressing some needs there. So this is part of choosing these laws as priority drafts.
Yeah, exactly. So this, go ahead, Chief Brent.
Yeah, I just like, I know there is a lot of language that it's council directing this, but even since before the election, we've been hearing what people have been saying, what the problems are. I mean, we know generally what's wrong in the community. So these laws are a first step to really try to put something there to fix those issues, whether it's environmental problems, dumping, whether it's land grabbing or anything like that, whether it's the problems in council. That's why we want the ethics codes and everything, and development of that further on. Like we've heard the community from day one, and we really want to put something in place so that even if we're not here, you know, whoever comes after us, whoever whoever the community decides to put here later, there's something there. But we want it to be something that, hopefully the people that come in with have a good mind. But if they don't, and they decide they don't like something about this, it's not easy. You have to bring it to the community, just like how we have to bring it to the community to pass and everything. And the community will be the ones to decide in the end if this is accepted or not. In order to remove these or change these, the community has to decide if they accept it in the first place, if they want the changes or not, and it won't be at any council or chief's discretion to change it. So that's something we're very mindful of.
And again, you have in the past and even in the recent past had, a split council or have had challenges with people having to be on or removed historically. You're not the only First Nation or the only government around the world or across Canada to have those kinds of issues. So why wouldn't we have a forward path? Why wouldn't we have a code of ethics that just sets out a fair process? Sometimes, you would have someone who has stolen from the community. They have to be removed, but they have to be removed in a fair process. If they're just accused of stealing because they're sleeping with somebody else's wife or something really good like that, then we have to have a fair process to prove that that's not the truth. So whatever happens on any council across Canada, you have to have ethical conduct rules, how they're accountable, how they're fairly applied to everybody who's on council now or in the future. And so we're really excited to share that with you and get your feedback. We want something that works, as Chief Brent has said, doesn't matter who's elected in future. We all know what the rules are, and we know what's fair as far as maintaining account people on council or removal processes. So our key goal is to make that again defensible and so that people understand what it is. So other governance work. So besides all of this lawmaking that we're doing and drafting and hours of thinking about how this should work, we're also working on the ethics commission. So this is a commission, maybe Sabra, you want to talk about this? You've been working very hard on establish a fair process to look at when problems might arise in the future.
Sure. So as per the Ganasatawage Custom Electoral Code, it calls for an ethics commission to be formed. And prior, it hasn't been formed. So we've had a really great opportunity to create this ethics commissions. And it's to promote that integrity and accountability, so in governance. And this commission is comprised of lawyers, professionals, mediators, arbitrators, and they're really there to ensure that decisions are being held to a very high standard that's really unique to MCK, but also following that procedural fairness that Cynthia really emphasizes. So there's been a lot of really good work now. It's newly formed and will be meeting shortly, and that's a very exciting, commendable piece.
Mm-hmm. So those people will operate independently, but they are all very experienced. We made a whole roster of people that we know are experienced across the country, and then they were interviewed independently in Indigenous law areas and in membership issues and in governance issues and things that might come up in the future. So we've established a very high level roster, and many have agreed to sit on. And so whenever they are needed, they can be called together as an ad hoc group of 2 or 3, depending on how many you need. And they're, like I say, they have come with knowledge and experience, but they're independent and can help make those kinds of decisions. So again, it's an exciting step that's new and improved. And then the code of conduct. We're also working on a code of conduct for elected officials, standards of behavior. We want to make sure everybody understands what their role is and how we need our leaders to work with other leaders across Canada. We need our leaders to work with the ministers from Canada and the Quebec officials. And so we've never had that in writing. So why don't we put all these good practices that we've seen over the past and we want for the future in writing. Another area we're working on at this governance table is a protected areas strategies. We've been hearing about how important it is to protect the remaining pristine areas and unsold areas of the mountain. We were taught immediately when we were starting to work on this table, this negotiation table, how important the shorelines were, the waterways. We did a whole bus tour to see the different cultural areas. We looked at the lacrosse fields, the baseball diamonds you've been managing so well. So we are working with at this table to push Canada to give us all of the necessary tools, all of the land descriptions, all of the if they're whatever the legal problems are, they're in the way of you getting your lands and you managing your lands yourselves. We want to knock those barriers down. So we're identifying them and we're starting to knock them down, and we're creating a protected area strategy. This has happened across Canada and other places. It's always a bit ad hoc, and it really just takes a lot of will and some very pushy people to make sure this happens. So that's what we hope to do. Other policies that we want to work on, like you say, once you do a law, you've got to have some policies in place. So the laws that we bring to you won't answer every question, but like I say, we now need to get those policies that support them drafted, and that's the next bit of work. We just included the vision statement, which we worked on in the governance workshops. And I think it's so important: proud, unified, safe, sustainable community. We've heard a lot about safety and about trying to envision a safer future for young people and those walking in the streets. Traditional values and teachings, how we make sure that there's the right space to grow the traditional values and teachings for the next generation. Working respectfully and responsibly together toward maintaining and restoring the land's autonomy, security, inherent rights. That is, strong people living in the prosperity will continue to protect the creation for generations to come. This is the vision that we hope will inform all of this work. So that's just an overview of the work that we're going to bring to you bit by bit, just as a start. And then we thought we would launch into the actual first bit of business, which is the lawmaking process. You can't have laws and you can't have policies and codes and things that you do well until you have a clear process that the community will pass it. I might just pause right now, and well, I think maybe it'll come up in the presentation. We know that you've had this governance act called KILGA, and so it's been there, but it isn't sufficient. It wasn't particular to MCK. It's a tool. It's part of a toolkit, but it's not enough. So the idea was to maybe create all these processes and laws that are more appropriate for what you need to do, which is get some laws making done and get some movement in the community. Okay, so maybe we'll switch to the other presentation now. Okay, so this is the lawmaking process that we want to bring to the people in the next consultation meetings to ideally pass. So why do lawmaking? It's part of self-determination. Why would we let somebody else write our laws for us? So it's sovereignty, it's self-determination, and it's preserving your culture and language and traditions. We think our lawmaking will give more space for policies and practices that are more culturally relevant. So again, you won't see a lot of cultural relevance in the high-level laws themselves, but they are the hook that then supports what needs to happen at the level of the community for that cultural relevance to grow and be protected. I don't know if that makes sense, but people always get disappointed that laws are not detailed, but they just aren't. And if they are detailed, it causes more problems. They have to be very high level.
Can I just point out one thing? Like, generally speaking, when we're saying MCK, we mean Ganasadaga and everything like that. Like MCK is just the mechanism, we've been put here to try and do this for you and everything like that, but all of this work really is for Ganasadaga. We're the ones here at the moment that are helping to get this done and everything like that, but like every time you see MCK, remember we're here for Ganasadaga. That's our whole point.
Well, maybe we'll switch that before we do our next presentation, because we shouldn't be talking about just MCK when we mean the community. So that's our error. So we'll fix that for the consultation chief. That's a good idea. Okay. So we're addressing specific needs, of course, things that that, as you say, the community has told us are priorities for them. And then we're making sure there's legal recognition.
Mhm.
So again, you want lawmaking processes that are clear and open, and we want to know when the community is going to be involved and how they're going to be involved. We also don't want to tax the community too much. You can't come to 5,000 meetings for one law. So we've got to be organized. We've got to have 1 or 2 or 3 really good meetings. We've got to have recording like this, things in writing. We can share this presentation on a website. So we've been really working on how do we share things with the community. And I know that new communications tools have been set up so that we can really reach people better than even in the past. So I think that was a challenge too. So this sets up standards for creating laws, changing laws, and then repealing them, so ending laws. Clearly, Kanesatake has inherent rights and jurisdiction over your territory, and though that inherent right is constitutionally affirmed and recognized under Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution, that means under Section 52 of the Constitution that is the supreme law of the land. So remember that whenever there's a conflict between your rights and your interests, your inherent rights and interests, that your rights are paramount. They are superior because they are protected under Section 52 and Section 35. They are recognized. So they are constitutional in nature. Anything that is contrary to that your constitutional rights should be struck down and ignored. So that's really important knowledge. Similarly, the United Nations Declaration, you have rights of self-determination. That has now been implemented in Canadian law, and Section 35 is supposed to be interpreted to reflect those broader international principles like free, prior, and informed consent, the right to create your own processes, the right to be recognized as self-determining people. So there's a real push to make change here. And so you also, as we mentioned, have authority under the Governance Act or KILGA or whatever you want to call it. When you call it S something, that doesn't work because S are laws that were not passed. This Governance Act was passed by the 2 governments and by Canada. So it is not the source of your rights. Clearly, you have inherent rights that are recognized by Section 35 and the international principles. There is also a specific act that can operate, the Governance Act, and I look at it as a round fence. And in that circle are your rights and your laws. And that fence is the Governance Act, and it operates simply to keep the federal government and the provincial government out of your business. Your laws take priority as you fill in that empty circle. The challenge is people didn't want to have a federal Governance Act as the source of any of your laws, and they are not. They are to tell Canada that your laws take care of, but you haven't filled in that circle yet. And so that's the work that we need to do together, is to make sure that your laws are paramount and take priority, and that the Governance Act and the Indian Act operate to keep others out of your authority.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the phases that we have here for the consultation process, maybe you want to jump in, Saber?
Yeah, of course. So, like Cynthia said, the first step of this is adopting this lawmaking process, and it gives Kanesatake a way to really implement laws, develop laws, repeal laws, amend laws. And part of that is a number of phases, and it can get a little complex, but it's important to have that. So we have phase 1, which is really accepting a draft law. So any member may present a law, MCK may present a law, and then if we're choosing to move forward, it's first accepted as a draft law. And that's being accepted in principle, saying this is a law we want to explore to see if it would serve Kanesatake. Then from phase 1, we move into phase 2, which is the community consultation process. So MCK, so the council, will choose a community consultation process from a number of pieces. They can include community meetings, workshops, a secret ballot vote. It could be one or it could be all three. And that's something that would be assessed based on the law. And then the draft law would then be made available to the community and given notice for any process. So any of that community consultation process, any of the voting process, and then the final part of phase 2 is receiving that community input on the law. So for example, I think Cynthia uses a great one, which is the dog leash bylaw. The dog leash bylaw, maybe we want a dog leash bylaw, which may require more of a workshop style community consultation because you'll want specific voices, maybe community members who have dogs. And then we gather that community input, and that's all considered. That moves us into phase 3, which is now a review of a post-consultation draft.
Can I jump in there? So just on choosing, maybe we're gonna go into that more on the
I can go back.
slides, but just on choosing the process, the problem with the way the Governance Act was written, if you just use that, not your own inherent rights to choose your processes, it looked like you had to have a full ratification vote as if we were having an election for any little law that you needed to pass. So we have laws that are big and complex, like zoning laws or how to deal with membership and residency and housing. Those are big laws, right? But we also need small laws, like when do the stores need to shut down? How do you operate a certain license for a certain type of store? The dog bylaw, the cat bylaw, those things, you don't need to have a full vote and in order to create a no chickens law, like we really need to have some kind of spectrum. So the way we've tried to develop it is use the Governance Act to say, okay, yeah, there are times when we will use that kind of process, but we will use whatever process is appropriate for the laws that people want to develop. So if we're doing a law that affects more of the elderly, we'll have a general community consultation, but then we may have 3 or 4 workshops with just elders, or just families that are caring for elders. So, we have to tailor the processes to the right work, and that's what hasn't happened in the past. I think that's led to the inability to go through with laws because it was too onerous. So that's why we've developed this gradation in this new process. You'll see that you can choose the right process for the type of law that you're trying to pass. So I thought I'd just add that.
Yeah, absolutely. So once then that community feedback's received, we move into phase 3, which is a review of the post-consultation draft. So let's say we got a lot of feedback on the draft and the draft law needed revisions. In post consultation process of phase 3 is where the updates would be made to the draft law, and then it also goes through legal. So that's an important part to ensure it's all set in every which way. And then it moves into the decision. So move to pass the law. MCK can then decide, this law's changed a lot since we had community consultation. We need to go back to the community and consult again, or we need to require a ratification vote to adopt the law, or we can say, we're going to reject the law. The community spoke very loudly that we don't want this law, so we're going to reject it. So there's a number of avenues in this post-consultation phase 3. Did you want to add anything there? Or you?
No, I think that's good. I think we want to kind of get it going and get out and get a process that moves smoothly. And so no, I think that works. We aren't going to be doing co-drafting. I often would, in the past, about 15 years ago, get laws that people sat around the table and they all tried to draft it, and it was like a bad film or a bad meal. You really need to give high-level vision of what you want, and then send away your legally trained people to do the drafting so that it all fits together and you don't have one part that has this definition, another part that has another definition, because 4 different people worked on it with different ideas of what the definition should be. So that's kind of why we set this process up as well. Don't come to legal too late. Get us involved in the beginning, and then we'll step out while you have your consultation, and we'll come back and take the amended version and refine it so you get a product that does what you asked us to do. What is the vision? We have to implement that, and that's how laws are crafted around the world. So I think this process will help.
Yeah, and then let's say there's a ratification vote, it's passed. We now move into phase 4, which is the enactment of the law. And so there's an issue notice that will be enacted with the date that it comes into force, and then it'll be posted and made available. So those are the phases, and I'll actually just run through them quickly, thinking about it from the lawmaking process. So we're trying to abide by these phases as we're adopting this lawmaking process. So the lawmaking process itself, we've got this draft law, it's been presented, MCK has decided to move forward. We're now going into phase 2. So the consultation process has now been, we're meeting virtually, I believe it was the 13th, November 13th or 14th, and then we're meeting in person, doing the second community consultation in person, and then we will review it. So we're getting community input. Yeah, we're sharing the draft, everyone input. So that's phase 2 for this part. And then we move into phase 3, which we would be able to review if there needs to be any changes or any revisions. And then we review it again through legal. And then there would be the decision to have a ratification vote, which I believe we have scheduled on deck for November 30th, but the notice isn't released quite yet. So that is the process itself that we are abiding by in adopting this lawmaking process. And then the phase 4 would be the enactment. So that's just an example of how it could work and how it is working for this specific process.
So I think the next slides, you'll get them when you get a copy of the PowerPoint, which will be accessible to everybody. But we can kind of whip through them because Faber was able to summarize them all.
Yeah, it's heavy text.
Yeah, we'll go through. And so this slide describes phase 1. After 21 days, we have some deadlines in there, so things don't just sit and not get passed for 3-4 years. We have to keep moving because we have other laws to work on. So 21 days after the draft law, the amendment is reviewed in a council meeting. A second council meeting is held, and they'll vote to either accept or reject the draft. Okay. Phase 2, once the law is accepted by council, then it goes to a community process. And again, laws that are really more complex, like land use planning, matters affecting members, conservation, health and safety, those that are really substantive laws, they will probably go to a large community approval process and a vote.
Those are just the details. Yeah, the broken down a little bit more is the community meetings. So saying that there needs to be at least 3 community meetings. If they're accessible online in person. If we were to do the workshops, it's at least 2 workshops. And then there's some provisions around the secret ballot vote. So those are outlined in the law as well.
These are some of the different types of community input and approval processes.
Okay. Again, very text heavy. This is some of the text that's in the law itself, but a notice must be provided. A copy of the law will be made available within 7 days of that acceptance of the community approval process. And then all comments or questions received from members will be heard and considered in the post-consultation draft.
And then in phase 3, of course, the legal expert will review the amendments and put it all together and make sure it all works. And then we go on to
the legal review, yeah.
Go ahead.
After the legal review, MCK will meet then and decide if we want to move forward with that enactment and if any more consultation is required or if we're going to go forward with the ratification vote.
And sometimes you won't. Sometimes a law that seems so important to 1 or 2 people isn't a priority, and so it will die. The feedback from the community that this is not our priority, that's nice, that's interesting, but we don't care about shrubbery, we care about health and safety or whatever it is. So obviously not every law will pass, but hopefully quite a few that you need, that you want, will pass.
Absolutely. And in the law, we do state that if it is rejected for whatever reason, the reasons have to be included in the rejection. Perfect. And then phase 4 is that enactment piece. So there would be a notice of enactment that includes things of like when it will become enforced, and it will be officially recorded in the registry, and it will be made available, and there will be notarized copies. And of course, in order to repeal a law existing, this process would be followed as well. So important pieces there. We do have some special emergency measures in the law. Do you want to talk to this at all? So under the emergency measures, we have that MCK can create emergency laws in order or orders when there's a serious risk to the lands and the member safety or health. So if there is a real emergency, which is defined in the law, then we have the ability to make an emergency measure, which would be in effect for a specified period of time. So if there's an emergency measure that has to be enacted, it would be enacted for 30 days for the length of that emergency that's being addressed.
So this process would help during, kind of post-flooding, when things are happening quickly. When we had the pandemic of COVID, it would have been good to have these in place, because it would clearly give your elected leadership some authority to get things done when you need them to get things done, but only for that emergency period, and then the power stops and they have to go out and do this whole phase 1, 2, and 3 process. But you don't want to require people to do a 3-phase process when your whole land is being flooded. So we need emergency measures in this process, but ones that have clear parameters of what you can do, when you can do it, and when you stop having the power to do that. So again, when you look at our draft laws and we share them, that's what the emergency measures are for.
Perfect. And then some general provisions about notice. So unless otherwise specified, be a minimum of 7 days before any meeting. So there has to be at least a notice of 7 days before a community meeting would happen, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I want to make sure people know about it. This meeting was done very kind of last minute because we wanted to get started and create a recording that we could share before we start the consultation. So you're here at the pre-consultation. You're getting an amuse-bouche. You're getting the taster here. But I think this recording plus the actual draft, if it can go out before the first consultation date, we're hoping that will make members more informed so they can give us better feedback. So we're excited.
Perfect. And just some other language that's in the law, that if any of the language in the law can't be clarified, then the language of Ganasatake, of Ganagahage can be used to clarify. MCK will review all the laws very regularly to ensure they're still functioning in the best interest of the community. And of course, that this law or any other law doesn't reduce your inherent right or treaty rights under Section 35 of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Now, the big question that always comes up is once we get these laws in place, this one is really a process, so I don't expect it to be challenged very much, but the other laws that maybe are dealing with lands and environment, maybe there'll be some challenge in the future. People are going to say, how can we enforce it? We don't have our police force in place or things like that. Really, when you create these laws, my experience is it's very valuable that most 93.5% of the population will want laws and will follow them and will want to know what the rules are and how the community is going to develop and how their lands are protected. Those that don't follow, we do have ways of doing agreements, policing agreements, so we do need to work on that with various forces. We need to create our own courts. We have a lot of work to do so that those who will never follow the laws can be prosecuted. But we're working on that at the same time. I don't think that's an excuse not to do laws. So I think it's important to take up that space and then find ways to have them enforced and implemented. There are a lot of enforcement provisions that we do in different First Nations that are about monitoring, compliance, showing up, sending out surveys, sending the aunties out to check whether the laws are being followed. There's all kinds of ways beyond just a police force that you can enforce really important laws. So I won't talk too much about that tonight, but we have thought about this. We are doing some work in that area, and we think these laws are well worth putting in place. And those are kind of my remarks, and I hope to answer any questions or hear your comments and your thoughts at this very preliminary stage. I know you haven't seen the text, but you kind of got a good idea of what's in the text through Saber's drafting of this presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm wondering, Chief Brandt, I'm not sure if you have any comments to this presentation or if you would just like to open it up to the participants for any questions.
I think we should just open it up. It really left me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what people often ask. They often ask, when, what are the dates, what's going to happen next? So that's in the presentation, when the consultations will be. What about the vote? We want to have it fairly soon, once people have a look at the law and have the in-person and the electronic consultation. This one is, again, it's just a process, so it's not going to be, it's not the sexiest law we're ever gonna pass here. But it's very important. Without it, we don't have clear deadlines and a clear process, so this is a bit bread and butter, but it's important.
Yeah, I think maybe okay, to go back to like jurisdictions and everything, I know people are probably concerned about that and whatnot. You described the Governance Act and the Indian Act as a fence, keeping the federal and provincial out and everything. And I know when council heard this, that was a new way of looking at it for us, and it was interesting, especially things like, say, speeding on the highway and accidents we have here and everything like that. In our attempts to deal with it, like we've had to deal with the MTQ, try to talk to them, and it's not useful because the situation's still going on. But looking at the lawmaking process, it actually does seem like there is a path forward there, because we can, uh, from my understanding, like say, set our own speed limits for the territory, and because our laws would take priority, that's something we can do. I mean, we might have to do some negotiating and whatnot, but that's I guess an example of very concrete things we can do, and that's like an example of our jurisdiction and what the laws allow us to do. But I think, yeah, look, I guess I guess the big issue will be getting a lot of that old and built up sort of hesitancy around the Governance Act, and to a lesser extent the Indian Act and everything like that. But I think it's just sort of a way of looking at it. Like these are
Yeah,
just tools. They're not they don't dictate how we live. They don't dictate anything like that.
yeah.
We
No,
use
yeah, too much of our energy. Like they take it, like trying to fight against the Governance Act or fight against the Indian Act has taken too much of our energy. We need the energy to create, as you say, Chief, the way forward, like the way that our laws should go. I just asked Saber to put up the whereas clauses for some of these laws that we are drafting to show that, the Mohawks of Kanesatake are a community of the Mohawk Nation, and they have inherent rights and jurisdiction. So that's your authority. You're passing this law to your own ancestral jurisdiction. One of the guiding principles and consequences for the next 7 generations and beyond, that we intend to protect and preserve the lands for the benefit of the next 7 generations. Then we talk about the Mohawks having Aboriginal rights and title that was already protected by Canadian laws of the Royal Proclamation or Crown laws of England, which make up the scenery of the two mountains. The rights of the Mohawk are recognized and affirmed as constitutional rights, which means they're the supreme law of the Canadian land. So not only do you have inherent rights from before Canada was ever born, but you're protected under Canadian law as well. And the rights are included in the United Nations Declaration. And then you also have authority under this Interim Land Governance Act, which is like a temporary version of a full self-governance right in Canada. And so we're at a self-government table to make sure it gets a lot more full, it gets fully implemented. But this portion of it has some things that are helpful to us, because they will, again, give us priority to keep Canada and the province out of your business. And then Section 7 of the Governance Act specifically states that you have the right to make laws in relation to the use and development of lands related to these areas. So these are the areas that Canada needs to stay out of if you make laws that are paramount, are higher laws in these areas. Canada and the provinces need to stay out of those areas. And so those are the laws that we want to kind of make sure that you make. And I think there's been a real misconception that Canada let us live under, that somehow this Governance Act in Section 7 was the source of our law. It certainly is not. It's simply one aspect of laws that we can pass, and it's really the source of our priority, our paramountcy. Does that make sense, Chief? I was trying to kind of expand on that a bit.
Yeah, I think, well, I know for myself and everything like that, just the interconnectedness of using our different the idea of there being different jurisdictions is a little bit complicated and a lot to wrap your head around. I'm still learning and everything like this, and this is like I've been in it for 2 years now, and like I'm still trying to wrap my head around this and whatnot. So it's understandable. It's complicated. It's like different threads, and we're trying to weave them into this net that will protect us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah, so you also have your election code, there are some protections under the Indian Act that you want, or things that you want to use under the Indian Act. You can decide, what you want to rely on, because they are, as you say, they're a web, they're overlapping jurisdictions. And that happens with federal laws, provincial laws, and municipal laws, for example, on the environment, right? So we're not the only government that has overlapping jurisdictions. So again, they're not the source. The source is inherent, and the source is from the creator. So these are just ways that we can operate to use to best effect all of the sources that you have access to. And so that's how we're going to present that when we share the law with you.
And Chief Brandt, maybe you just want to confirm, but I do believe this law was made available on the website.
The lawmaking law it's on the Mohawk Council website for anybody there. It's both English and French, and I believe you might have to dig a little bit, but I believe it's also on the Conestoga community discussion page. Maybe I'll ask the administrator if they can upload it to the files at some point, just so it's easier for people to grab, something like that. Yeah. But yeah, and like getting back to the whereases and whatnot, it's very it looks like a lot of our BCRs and everything. This is the type of thing that a lot of our time in meeting is spent reading out loud. But yeah, I think I don't know. I personally really do believe that we're at that point. We do need to we do need some sort of law framework here, and we're doing the work, and we'll bring it to the community, and hopefully when they see the words and everything like that, I think it's important for people to actually look at the document and read it carefully, and keep in mind that, like, do try to do a clean reading, whereas you're not jumping in with preconceptions of other things you've heard or things that maybe you've been told, because look at the words themselves and see what they're saying. See what they're saying, because documents, contracts, laws, and everything like that, it's what's on the paper that matters. It doesn't matter anything that isn't in the document or on the paper doesn't apply. It's very literal. You take it very literally. If you're worried about something being in law and it isn't there, you don't really have to worry about it. It's not something being touched by that. I mean, there's a little bit of spread sometimes. You have to understand what the implications are and everything. You have to make sure that something you're agreeing to and something that you're writing and putting into law isn't going to have any unintended consequences, but you mitigate that to the best you can and everything. And that's why First Nations law is here helping us and everything. They're very good at this, and why we want the community to look at this too, because as much as council can look at this, as much as the law firms can look at this and everything like that, we're all approaching this from our particular angles, and we all have blind spots. Maybe there's something we're not considering that really is important to include, and we're just not aware of it. So that's why the community consultation is also important, just to make sure that, we're not unintentionally missing something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if
I think
any
I think we had a
chat
question.
people can,
Okay.
raise their hand
Excellent.
or just turn your camera on if you're comfortable, just say hi. We're very friendly.
Oh, there we go. From you want me to read this out? And
Sure.
okay. So from K Cree, uh, which type of law would deal with land being taken over, encroached upon, to build cannabis stores, hotels, and casinos without permits, authorization from the MCK, the province, the federal government, or the community? Will it be the trespass law? If there is no police force, how will this type of law be enforced?
It's a great question.
Yeah, it definitely is trespass. If there's no permit or no authorization, then they are trespassing. If there's no approvals, then, there are also federal and provincial laws that make that illegal, and they would overlap with your law. So your law would give guidance, but there are also other laws that can be enforced by the provinces and the feds. We can also negotiate prosecution agreements, and we've been pushing on that, and it's working very well in other First Nations, where we require the prosecutor to prosecute your laws. And again, we're always looking at what the penalties are in the other federal and provincial laws, and we make them kind of similar, so it's easy for them if we insist that they prosecute our laws for them to prosecute. You also can, the Mohawk Council and Ganawagi can hire your own prosecutor. I know Ganawagi, they do that in Ganawagi, and we've done that in other Mohawk nations, where we've hired an independent lawyer to be our prosecutor and send them to court. So there are ways for us to make sure we can enforce this, and it's the trespass, but it would probably also be a business license law that we need to pass. We would need to get a zoning law in place, which is very important. Where can you put your cannabis stores? It should not maybe be beside the daycare, or the school. So things that need to, as soon as we get this lawmaking process in place, we can really go at any law that you need to protect the territories.
Yeah. And I'd like to bring it back to something that you said at the beginning, like regarding the process. It's not just MCK that can propose laws. I mean, obviously we have to follow a process. We have to make sure everything's good. But if the community wants to propose something, we can start off with. There's no guarantee. I mean, it has to
Yeah,
follow the
sure.
process. It has to all the T's have to be crossed, I's have to be dotted, and everything like that. But if there's something that the community feels is not being addressed, the community can present it to us, and we'll push it through. Well, assuming it's for the best of the community. I mean, we're assuming everything is.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and once we have this lawmaking process enacted and in place, it makes things a lot easier for us to move other draft laws forward and receive those comments.
Yeah.
You haven't had a law that would operate to have the zoning in place to authorize or not authorize, so it's all happening under somebody else's laws right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that touches on Cheryl's question. She was asking if any stores have been authorized. To my knowledge, no, and there is no process to authorize cannabis stores, to my knowledge. So, and it can't. If one is saying there is, I don't. I would like to see the paperwork because that'd be news to me.
Oh, we have one coming in from Eric.
For myself, I'm simply assisting to see your procedural measures organization, which I think are very simple and well conducted. As an outsider mostly involved with my Innu community side, I won't intervene, but I'm observing your properly conducted meeting transparency procedures. It's inspiring, and if I can eventually help in any ways, I would be delighted. Thank you very much, Eric. I don't know. He's a historian, by the way. He is a historian, familiar with his work and whatnot. So, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. No, Eric, I think there'll be lots of help needed because just to get the word out, to share information, it sounds like you maybe in your Innu leg have been through some of this. So welcome to the team. Thank you. Let's see if we can find Cheryl's. Okay, here she is. Okay,
Yeah.
has section 24, S24, being considered as well as the Oka municipality, which has been applied to me and my property in the village of Oka. So yes, I don't know what you mean by S24. Do you mean the Governance Act, Kilga, S24? I think that's what. Certainly, we need to address any infringements to your lands from the municipality of Oka. That's why when we're talking about the protected areas, we've been trying to figure out exactly what Oka thinks they own, or we think we own. So at this negotiation table, we're getting all the maps out and we're looking at things to show Canada, look at this mess, look at the overlay and the gaps that you've created. This is not a cohesive family territory for all to protect their lands. And we need a big change here. So we are listening to you and we will be coming back for more discussion on what we do about the patchwork of lands.
Oh, so I think Cheryl's saying that the municipality is is having police to respond.
Your land disputed
Yeah.
fire service to check
And
your
put it
fires,
sacred.
sacred fires. Oh my goodness. That's because they have no knowledge of the culture and the needs and what a sacred fire is. Again, that's why it's really important that we need to draft laws and policies that protect your cultural practices and your sacred fires, and they have to get right out there to the police and fire, and we want an agreement with them that they will not interfere, because that's contrary to your constitutional right. Your sacred fire is part of your indigenous rights. So that's a clear cut case that we just have to get some agreements in place and some laws in place. And thank you for raising that.
Yeah. I think, yeah. I suspect what she's sort of talking about is the harmonization that's
Oh,
like that is what a lot of people are worried about, and it's understandable.
yeah,
But it's
I
a
think it
two-way
might.
street. It's a two-way street, and the problem is we haven't been forcing Oka to deal with our concerns as well for the properties that are, bordering them, whether that's directly in the village or whether it's on the edges of the larger part of the territory or whatnot. Things like I'm not exactly sure what she means about calling police and land disputes and whatnot. I know there are, um, yeah, there are various properties that occasionally have disputes and whatnot, but in that case, it would probably be us if it's a question of like Oka bylaws and everything that are causing a friction. We'd probably first
Mhm.
of all see like, okay, if it is something like really safety related, it makes sense to, okay, is this something that's legitimate or is it being used in a bad faith
Dramatic.
way?
Yeah,
So that's the type of thing, and then we'd take it from there and negotiate a way to like resolve whatever the conflict and friction is.
Mhm.
It's not a case. The harmonization isn't supposed to be a case of where it's always us giving in to Oka and the municipality. It's a two-way street. We have to come to some sort of accord, and that just hasn't really been done. But also being afraid of the term harmonization and what it means doesn't help the situation at all, too. These types of
Yeah,
things you got to face head on and deal with.
yeah, so the harmonization, there's a clause that talks about, the idea was you don't want to create a conflict of laws situation where there's a law at Oka for one property and that we have a totally different law, like, they can build a cannabis store and we can build a daycare on the neighboring property. That doesn't work at all. So the idea with the drafters was they wanted to make sure that there was some discussion or some harmonization. but we are not required to harmonize anything. And so that has been misinterpreted as a requirement to harmonize laws with OCA. OCA is a municipality. They don't have constitutional laws. They don't have inherent rights. So the laws that we draft here for Kanesatake have a lot more authority and power. And if we want to create regulations that are in any way matching, we may do a harmonization agreement, but we're not required to. And they would normally have to harmonize with us if anybody has to harmonize. So I am not worried about that clause, and I've been very clear with Canada how we see that clause, and they're fine with it. So they're not going to be requiring us to do anything.
Yeah. You put it great. I mean, the whole thing is our community has so many more responsibilities and jurisdictional breadth than any municipality. No municipality deals with the federal government on topics, just basic topics, like we do, like any other Native community does. It's because we do have that fence in place, and we gotta figure out how that works at times and everything like that. But it's because we do have rights that aren't, that are particular to us.
Yeah, but just take up that space. Cheryl, I think that she undid your mic. If you want to take off your mute, you could ask your question in typing, or you could ask it with voice, whatever you prefer.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, hello. Hello, I've been listening. Thank you. It's been very informative. And I think it will respond to this this twilight zone we've all been experiencing without laws and direction and boundaries with each other, so we can all become good neighbors. Just give you a background as to my concern with the village is because I built a home in 1992 in the village. And so there are other members that live around me and municipal people from Oka. And it's been a very peaceful existence, but in the past 5 years, I'd say the climate has changed. And I had requested, even the mayor of Oka and the former Grand Chief Simon and Victor Bonspiel, and a month ago 7 chiefs, and nobody answered me back. So, I just want to say thank you for all the work you're doing, because I know how hard it is to do this work. I used to be in human resources with the AFNQL Commission, so I took a step back from all systems to really observe how to better help our people. So thanks, Brant, for showing up and moving this file, because it is the young ones like Brant and his peer group and the ones younger that this is to benefit, really. I'm retired now, so I'd like to sporadically, guide and mentor, but to commit to a lot of hours at evening is a challenge we all recognize as technicians. So, I'll be watching this and participating in it, and I'd like to see come to fruition is that we know everybody on every lot that is Kanesatake land, and we know who's living in those houses. Because I am an advocate for murder missing Indigenous women, and there's a lot of violence that goes unreported or covered up. And so there's a real fear and a reality that, you don't get involved, you mind your own business. And one day it'll just show up next door to you, and you're going to have to deal with, neighbors that don't have the same culture as you. They don't have the same lifestyle as you. And, to have dark skin in the village today, I'm a walking marker as an Indigenous woman, and also as a Mohawk. I don't go much anywhere in the village of Oka anymore since the cannabis shops opened up. I, as a woman, even though I'm in the retired age, there's all kinds of people that just want to hook up with us so they can foster their own entrepreneurial spirit within the illegal trade that has built fine empires in our community, and it's not going to be an easy battle. You know, I have a lot of professional allies out there from my former life as a technician in employment and training. So I can see this as a very important training for, you know, chiefs that come in young, you know, like Brant and some of the other young ones that are in there, and that, you know, they're going to build something together for us so that when we get to the age where we're going to need to go somewhere and be safe outside of our home, like into elder care and elders' home, that we're safe there too. So thank you all. I just want to say that my camera's locked on my phone. I just got a new phone, so I'm locked out of a lot of things. I used to have an IT technician support me, so now I'm on my own. But thank you so much, all of you present and listening. I hope we all get our voice together and that we're able to stand in front of our homes, and it's a reflection of our culture, that we care and love and respect the land and the people on it. So thank you. That's all I got to say.
Thank you,
That
Sarah.
all, just all those beautiful words. That was very beautiful. Okay, now I want to go right to women's protection law. I
Yeah,
want to
writing
save in
this
our
down.
home law. So that those are things that we can tackle too. And yeah, I hope you'll help us with all of this. We definitely did a chiefs governance. We're asked to do a new chiefs governance training, and we did new chiefs briefing tools, and all those technicians that support the chiefs. They're doing a lot. You know, they get exhausted too. So your voice, Cheryl, and your support, that just buoys people, and it gives them that high level vision that they need, so they're not stuck in the weeds. We do have maps of what's happening in the village and the different things, and so we're putting those together, and those will be shared in this lawmaking process and in the self-governance table too. So we're just creating all these tools to try and share information with people but get some results. We've been told to get some results, and that's why we decided to take this file.
I think, how are you feeling about coverage and whatnot? Are there any maybe little bits or something you'd like to elucidate on more, or are we feeling like we hit most of the points we wanted to tonight?
I personally feel good about that. I think we covered a lot. It's the first time, and again, people want to get it in writing. They know they can see it on the website now. And like I say, I don't want to make this too long or nobody will listen to the recording.
Yeah.
So I think we should quit while the get's good and enjoy your evening. Thank you for all of you who dedicated your evening time to this, and it's hopefully the first of many important talks. I'll leave it to you, Chief Brand, to close it off. Anything, Saber?
Okay. I would like to remind people that copies of the lawmaking law are available on the MCK website. And like I said, on should be on community discussion group. If you want a paper copy, you can come to the band office, and our good receptionist Bertha should be able to print you up one. Please take the time to look it over. These can't press enough how important these are. So, you know, take a few minutes and look at the document these ladies have worked so hard on.
Chief, I'll also recommend that we send you these PowerPoint presentations, because sometimes they're a little bit nicer to see the charts than the actual reading of the laws, and people will understand phase 1, 2, and 3 of the lawmaking. So we'll send these to you maybe first thing in the morning, and then maybe Bertha can help us get them somewhere.
Okay.
Thank you, Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, Lily.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you have a good night.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.